Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We look forward to sharing important findings about the rise in employment scams that were highlighted in our 2022 BBB Scam Tracker Risk Report. But before we begin, I'd like you to meet our panel. My name is Melissa Lanning-Trumpauer. I'm the Executive Director of the BBB Institute for Marketplace Trust. Joining me today are my guests, Abigail Bishop, Head of External Relations and Scam Prevention for Amazon, Keith Spencer, Career Expert for Flex Jobs, and Amisha, a scam survivor who will share her story with us today. Thank you all for joining us. We'll hear from each of them in just a moment. First, I'd like to share some BBB research data on employment scams. The research that I'm going to share with you is based on data that was submitted to BBB Scam Tracker, our consumer prevention and reporting platform. This is a platform that we built back in 2015. It allows anyone to go in and report a scam, and it will also allow anyone to go in and actually search scams. So if, for example, you get a suspicious email or you're visiting a website and you're not sure if it's fake or not, you can actually go in and search on Scam Tracker by the field, by email address, by business name, and so forth, and to find out if somebody has reported that scam. So it's a tool that if you haven't used before, I recommend that you check it out. We actually relaunched Scam Tracker in 2022 with support from Capital One and Amazon. So it's a brand new tool, upgraded, much more user-friendly with a lot more bells and whistles for you. So the Scam Tracker Risk Report, which I'm going to share with you, some findings, uses some of the data that's submitted to Scam Tracker. And I'm going to share some of those findings with you now. One of the things, so this report comes out every single year. This latest one that we have is for the year 2022. So it's a full year of data submitted to Scam Tracker, and we look at all the different trends that are happening in terms of scam trends, tactics that are used by scammers, and a lot of other things. Who's being impacted? How who's more susceptible to different scams? And one of the most exciting things about it is every year we come out with our top list of riskiest scam types. And you can see here on the slide that we've presented that we use our BBB risk index to determine what the riskiest scams are. And so we're not looking at just the volume of the scams. We're looking at three different things. We're looking at the volume of the scam type, how many were submitted. We're looking at the percentage of people that actually reported losing money to that scam type. And then we're looking at how much money people lost. So those are the three factors that go into us coming up with the list that you're now seeing on your slide on the screen. You can see here that in 2022, our top 10 riskiest scams included online purchase scams, which those are essentially online shopping scams. And that was number one riskiest for the third year in a row. So it's been riskiest since the pandemic hit us, with more people online. And you can see the full list. If you go in, the report is available on our website for free, so you can go in there and read about all of these different scam types. But the topic that we're talking about today is that number two riskiest scam, employment scams, which, as you can see, in 2021 was actually ranked number 3, and it actually rose to number 2 in 2022. So if we want to look more closely at employment scams, just to dig a little deeper on why it was number 2 riskiest overall, and the reason being is because the volume of that scam type actually went up. The number of reports submitted in 2022 went up, but the biggest change really was that median dollar loss you saw. So the median dollar loss for this scam type that was reported to Scam Tracker was $1,500, which is the highest median dollar loss of any scam type reported to our platform. Actually, it's tied with home improvement, but those two scams have the highest median dollar loss, which is why it's making such a big impact. You can also see that while it's number 2 riskiest overall, it's actually the number 1 riskiest scam for ages 18 to 34. So a lot of young people are actually being impacted by this scam type. Not surprisingly, that also means that it was number 1 riskiest for students. The other thing to note here is that it is number 2 riskiest for ages 35 to 64. So it's having an impact on everyone, really. And then the last bullet here on the slide really talks about something that is very, very interesting. It was the number 2 riskiest scam reported by military spouses. And we know that military spouses, they're moving a lot sometimes, and they're looking for new jobs. And so it's not too much of a surprise. We've seen this in previous years, that this scam type is having an impact on military spouses. So we also looked at payment methods. We break it out in lots of different ways. It's in the full report, but just wanted to point out that the 2 payment methods for employment scams that came up were online payment system. So in other words, scammers are asking people to actually pay them by Venmo and Zelle and other peer-to-peer digital payment applications. So that's another thing for people to just keep in mind on how they're paying people. And then check. And check, if we, I'm going to talk a little bit more about. That's actually not a surprise that was employment scams was number 2 on the list for check. So I want to talk a little bit about fake checks, because that is a very common tactic that is used to perpetrate this particular scam type. It's actually, fake check scams are actually used to perpetrate many different types, but particularly employment scams. And what happens is typically the recruiter is reaching out and telling you that they want to send you a check for either home office equipment or training that you need to take. They send you a very official looking check. You get that in the mail. They ask you to quickly deposit it in the bank and then transfer funds to another account so that they can send you the equipment and set you up for training. What people don't realize is that the check's fake. And by the time they realize it's fake, they've actually transferred real money from their own account to the scammer, and they're out that amount of money. Another common trend with this particular scam type are reshipping scams. That's another thing we see in the data. There's a high number of job offers that are happening where they're asking people to inspect packages and reship packages. And so just another thing to keep in mind when it comes to this type of scam. And also just beware of any kind of job that is offering, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If they're offering you great wages, you can work from home, and they don't really require many skills, then be very suspicious. That's a real red flag for this particular scam type. And so just to wrap up some of the data around this scam type, we have pulled together some resources that you can use. Special thanks to Amazon and FlexJobs for sharing some of their resources. We are going to include BBB resources on there as well. And those links are going to be provided to you on our website. So if you visit the website for this particular session, you will see those links on the website. So with that, to help illustrate the impact of employment scams on job seekers, we've invited a special guest to share her personal experience with this type of scam. Amisha, I'd like to welcome you to the panel. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Mel.
Hi. Could you tell us a little bit about how the scammer connected with you?
Yeah, so earlier this year, I was looking for a remote work opportunity, and I came across a job posting on LinkedIn for a remote transcriber position. I applied via LinkedIn, and I think the same day I was contacted via email by someone that appeared to work at the company. They had me fill out a questionnaire that had a lot of typical job interview questions and also served the purpose of testing my typing speed, which tended to match up with the transcriber role. Once I completed that questionnaire and returned it to them, I was offered a job and sent a contract to sign in return. After I did that, we started talking about the equipment that I would need and how much that would cost.
Wow, and we know that many of these scammers are professionals. They're really good at what they do. Can you share some of the things that this person did to gain your trust?
Yeah, there was quite a few things that gained my trust. So before I even applied to the job, I looked up the company that had listed it. And it's a real company. I found their physical address, they have a website, and I even read some former employee reviews about what it's like to work there. Beyond that, once I started corresponding with this person, their email address and their signature matched up with what I understood the company to be all about. For example, the company worked in a school district, and every school district email I've ever seen has a state abbreviation, K-12 US. It's exactly the email the person I was talking to had. So all that stuff gained my trust. Once we started talking about the actual job, the hours that they were going to require, the formatting of the work I would be doing, the softwares I would be using, everything seemed very reasonable and accurate to my previous remote work experiences and my transcription experience. Beyond that, the person I was talking to told me I would be getting a follow-up phone call, and we even shared schedules to find a time where I could be have an orientation on Zoom. So that also worked to gain my trust. I felt like I was entering a real workplace environment and talking to people that I would be working with in the future. Once we moved into the conversation about why I would need a work laptop and how much that would cost, I actually looked up the kind of laptop they were telling me I was going to have. We talked about the operating software, the other various confidentiality things, antivirus software, the transcription software, and all of the price points matched up. They let me know they'd be sending me a check for about $4,300. That seemed to match up with the amount of money I was seeing online this type of equipment typically costs. Once I got a check, I wasn't familiar with the bank, so I looked it up. And the bank that the check is issued from is a local bank in the same area that the company's located. So I thought, great, maybe I've never heard of this place, but it all seems to match up to me. And I also thought the reason that I would be dealing with all of this stuff seemed accurate, that they had found a local vendor, so I would send the money and it would all be very efficient and I could get started super quickly. Yeah, lots of reasons that they gained my trust.
Wow. So clearly you took time to check them out, but these scammers are getting more and more sophisticated. Were there any red flags that made you think this might be a scam, or something even that you recognized in hindsight after the experience?
So in the moment, while I was corresponding with this person, there were a lot of things that gave me pause, but that I wasn't necessarily suspicious of. I didn't realize they were red flags until afterwards. So things like inconsistent verbiage. Sometimes the job would be referred to as one thing, then another time something else. They had some typos in some of the documents that they sent me. And the person I was talking to wasn't as professional in their email language than other people I've spoken to. I also thought it was a little bit strange how fast and urgent everything seemed to be. By the end of the first day I was talking to this person, our email thread had over 100 emails. It was a lot more like texting and back and forth constantly than any other job I've applied to or had before. Once I wired the money, they let me know that there was actually an issue with that local vendor, so they were going to send me another check, and they found a different vendor for me. And when that check, the bank put a hold on that second check. When I tried to deposit it, they asked me to front the money myself. And that was the biggest red flag for me, which I refused to do. Unfortunately, I didn't realize at that point that the money I had wired was actually my own. But I did sort of feel like they were just a demanding, less than ideal employer. I still didn't put together or connect the dots that these were red flags and that this was actually a scam. In hindsight, everything was one big glaring red flag. The email address I mentioned earlier that seemed accurate actually used dashes in between the state abbreviation K-12 US and not the standard dots. And anybody can make an email signature anything that they want, so that doesn't necessarily mean that they're who you think they are. After I figured out that I had lost around $4,300 and that I had been scammed, I called the number listed for the actual company. And the woman I spoke to on the phone let me know that they had been getting hundreds of calls from people that week with the same story as me. So I was frustrated by that, and I had wished that they had put something on their website. I learned that they found out about the scam on a Monday, and I applied for the job on a Tuesday. So lots and lots of red flags that I unfortunately did not realize were red flags until afterwards.
Yeah, wow. Is there anything you wish you'd known before you responded, or anything that you would want to share with others who haven't been targeted yet, but may be targeted in the future?
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing overall is that I just didn't know employment scams existed. So that's something that I think everyone should be aware of. Even if a company is real, that doesn't mean that they posted the job. That doesn't mean that they're not being impersonated by somebody else. All of this information that I have now, I think would have really helped me to be cautious and vigilant in a way that would have protected myself if I had just known that this type of scam was even out there. I also wish that I had known that a lot of very common job sites don't vet the jobs that are being posted on those job boards. I did see a lot of really helpful resources, blog posts and articles from places like LinkedIn and Indeed and other common sites that give you some tips and tricks on how to avoid or recognize fraudulent job opportunities. But I didn't really look into employment scams until after I had been scammed. So some of these resources are out there, but they're not necessarily places where you'd see them unless you're actively seeking them out. I also wish that I had known a little bit more about banks and how it works when you deposit a check. When you're in good standing with your bank and you deposit a check, a lot of times they'll credit your account before they check if it's actually legitimate. So on my end, I assumed once the balance went up, everything was cleared and it was totally fine. And that is what allowed the scammers to convince me to wire money that I thought was theirs, but ended up being my own. Something that I learned afterwards was there's a lot of helpful places to report these issues so that people don't have the same problems that I did in the future. So once I realized that it had all been a scam, I reported to the police, the Attorney General, the FBI has like a cyber crimes portal, and of course the Better Business Bureau Scam Tracker. And then I took some other personal precautions to freeze my credit and change lots of passwords and other things like that. But I think it's important for anybody out there to know that even if you take precautions and do as much as you can, it doesn't mean that you won't be a victim, and that it's not worth feeling ashamed about. You're not the person that tricked somebody out of money. You're someone that was looking for work and you're doing your best, and it is what it is sometimes, unfortunately.
I couldn't say it any better myself. Honestly, thank you so much. I'm really sorry to hear about the loss of money, but I have to just applaud you for everything you did. You did so many things right, Amisha, and I think it is a good, important message for folks that these folks are professionals. This is what they do for a living. They're very sophisticated, so don't beat yourself up about it. But you did so much. You did everything right, and still this happened. And I'm really sorry to hear that. But I do want to just say thank you for reporting the scam. Thank you, and thank you especially today for actually sharing your story with us, because both of those things are going to help to protect others, and we're really grateful to you. So I just want to say thank you so much, Amisha.
Thank you.
Awesome. Now I'd like to welcome our next guest, Abigail Bishop of Amazon. Hi, Abby.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
So you can actually relate to Amisha's story in an interesting way. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you can relate to this story?
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to follow such a compelling anecdote as Amisha's story. I certainly relate on a personal level, having seen so many of these types of impersonation schemes in different communication modalities, whether it's text messages or emails or phone numbers. As you said, Mel, these scammers are very sophisticated, and it is very easy for everyone to carry some degree of susceptibility to these types of crimes. And so I relate on a personal level, but I also relate on a professional level. Amazon, like so many other trusted brands, is and has been impersonated in employment scams, as well as other types of MOs. And at Amazon, we have a zero tolerance policy for anyone who would impersonate our brand or anyone else's. And we work on a couple of different areas to support consumers who are trying to avoid these types of scams through education. As Amisha said, she wasn't aware that there was even a thing of impersonation employment scams. And so knowing that those things are out there, things like partnering with the Better Business Bureau, even last year on a consumer education campaign to get the word out on what these types of scams look like. Making sure that we're doing what we can internally to apply tools and technologies to ensure that consumers really know it's us. Again, to Amisha's super powerful story of some of the nuance, even down to the email addresses, right? One of the examples that we've done in the last year is we've applied some email verification technology where when you see an Amazon logo next to an @amazon.com email address, you can go into that email with confidence that that is truly Amazon that you're interacting with. It's things like that that help to ensure that consumers know that it's genuinely an Amazon communication. And then lastly, we go after bad actors. We go after these scammers. We work really closely with law enforcement to do this as well. Last year, we shut down over 20,000 phishing websites, 10,000 phone numbers that were engaged in fraudulent activity, and referred over 100 bad actors across the globe to law enforcement to seek justice for these crimes. And even with all of that, these are very persistent challenges that require so many different cross-sector stakeholders to lean in and work across all of these different dimensions to make an impact.
Awesome. That's great work. Can you tell us what guidance would you share about how to ensure the company that is listed for a job listing? So just giving advice to folks, what can they do to protect themselves and actually know that the job that they're applying for is legitimate?
Yeah, I think going back again to Amisha's story, she did the right thing in going to the company's website and ensuring that the job posting is there. Is sort of step number one to validate that it is a true job listing associated with that company or organization. At Amazon, all of our jobs are listed on Amazon.jobs. And so when you go to that site, you'll be able to see all of our genuine job listings that are available for application. And relating again back to Amisha's story, one of the things that we've been very vocal on over the last year, especially as these types of crimes have picked up momentum, is the fact that Amazon, like many other organizations, is never going to ask you to pay for anything, to pay for access to an interview or anything during the recruitment process. There will be no transactions required of applicants. And we want for people who start to see some of those signals to know that is operating outside of our standard practices and not something that Amazon is going to be employing. So if you're seeing something similar, trigger those spidey senses and step away.
Yeah, thank you. It is helpful to know just the general red flags for any scam type, I think. So if somebody thinks that they're being targeted by a scammer who's pretending to be Amazon, what should they do? Where should they go to report it?
Well, before you even get to reporting, I would say if you are suspicious, if you're kind of sensing a false sense of urgency, you're being asked to pay for things that don't really quite make sense, there's some inconsistencies in the communication, all these things that Amisha called out in her story, disengage with the scammer. And I recommend collecting and retaining any information you have about your interaction. if it's emails that you were in communication with the scammer, if it was phone numbers associated with the scammer, anything that you can kind of get in your back pocket to help identify who these criminals are is very valuable to the investigative teams that want to seek justice for these crimes. So disengage and gather the evidence is sort of step one from my perspective. And there are several sort of reasons for that, because scams do not happen at Amazon. We rely so much on self-reported data and insights from people who have had exposure to these types of crimes. They're happening off of our store. They're happening outside of our systems. Outside of having people self-report, it's very difficult to have a pulse on what are some of the trends, what are some of the orders of impact of these types of crimes. And so self-reporting is just so important with helping with our scam prevention efforts. And you can report them in a number of different ways. And we've cited some of them already, and Amish has already tapped into some of them already. But I would also add, from Amazon, we have a self-reporting tool available for any impersonation scams that consumers are exposed to. It is at our website and available on our mobile app. Customers can report that at www.amazon.com/reportascam. You can also report it to the Scam Tracker. The BBB Scam Tracker is a terrific resource, and report it there. But also you can see if other people have experienced similar types of schemes from their respective vantage points. So it's a great resource for multiple fronts. And then report to the respective law enforcement agencies is really important as well. And so doing that is all very powerful. And again, reporting is key. It is so helpful. There is no shame in reporting these types of scams. They are so good. These scammers are so good. They're so manipulative. They're so convincing. Anybody can fall victim to them. And so please report. I applaud folks like Amisha who have put their story out there and also reported these crimes. So the reporting is key. At any of those reporting mechanisms, please do so.
Thank you, Abby. We appreciate you joining us today. That was really great information. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to invite our last guest, Keith Spencer, to join us. Hi, Keith.
Hi, Mel. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So my first question for you, in your role at Flex Jobs, I'm sure these kinds of scams are important to you. Can you tell us what warnings you have for anyone looking for new employment?
Yeah, absolutely. These helping people avoid these types of scams is important to me personally and Flex Jobs as a company because, these job scammers are targeting people in really vulnerable situations, right? Like we're talking about job seekers who may be unemployed, out of work for extended periods of time, really in need of a job, maybe feeling some of that financial pressure. So the fact that these scammers are preying on people like this is terrible. So in terms of, the main warnings for job seekers, first and foremost is to not take anything at face value, kind of operate with sort of that healthy dose of skepticism as you're job searching and try to employ, some extra steps like, we've talked about some of the extra steps that Amisha took, during her job search, trying to employ some of those extra steps just to help better protect yourself. There's no guarantee that you can avoid it, but you can take some extra steps. But one of the biggest things is to, educate yourself on common scams. So, phishing scams, wire transfers, fake checks, things like that are common occurring scams. That's really important as well. And understanding some of the red flags that Amisha talked about. If Amisha had known about these red flags ahead of time, it could have potentially helped her protect herself a little bit better. But still, again, there's no guarantee. So to recap some of those red flags, if there's an overarching sense of urgency, like they're really trying to rush you through the process, if you receive sort of an unsolicited job offer without even applying for a job, if you find that there is maybe a sort of suspect URL with the company name, or you can't find the company website, things like that. Also too, if you never get the opportunity to meet with someone face to face or actually have an interview with someone, that could be another warning sign as well. Also too, if you are asked for any type of money or sensitive information up front, if the salary listed is too good to be true, all of these things are important red flags to be aware of. And just because you encounter one of these red flags doesn't necessarily mean that it's a scam, but the more red flags that you encounter, the greater your concern should be. And I'll also mention too, because Amisha pointed it out, if you see inconsistencies in the job posting or maybe spelling or grammatical errors, that could also be a red flag there as well. And you want to make sure that you're doing your research like Amisha did, taking some of those extra steps to check the company website, maybe try to also verify it against their company profile on LinkedIn. Also the people that you're interacting with, see if you can see or find them listed in the company's directory or again on their LinkedIn profile. Just taking some of those other steps can help you. And then also lastly for this question, just kind of trust your instincts. That can be challenging if you aren't aware of scams, or maybe you're really new to the job search process. But if something feels off, trust that instinct and maybe take a step back or try to employ some of these extra steps that you might not have taken already, just to help keep yourself safe.
That's great advice, Keith. Thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about what FlexJobs does to keep people safe?
Yeah, so trying to keep job seekers safe and help job seekers avoid scams was one of the main reasons that FlexJobs was created in 2007. And so we vet 100% of the jobs that are posted on our site. We have a team of researchers that works to verify the legitimacy of these job postings before they ever are, posted on our actual site. So that's one of the main things that we do to help try to protect job seekers, but also too, just trying to spread awareness. We have a wealth of free resources, informative and educational resources that we, create and distribute for job seekers through, articles and blog posts and webinars and social media posts and things like that. Just to try to spread that awareness, because like Amisha said during her with what she was sharing, if she had known about these red flags and these potential scams, she could have potentially avoided that. And again, it's not. This was said by both Abby and Amisha. It's never the victim's fault to not know about these things. I do want to be really clear there. It's the sophistication of these scammers. They are finding ways that you haven't heard of to try to scam people. So really just consistently trying to stay on top of trends and things like that can really help job seekers, and that's one of the things that we try to do.
Awesome, thank you. So my last question for you, what advice do you have for anyone who has experienced an employment scam?
Yeah, so I'll echo a lot of what Abby shared. Ceasing all communication, I think, is a good first step, and keeping the receipts. Make copies of any interactions that you have had with that individual or individuals is a really good idea, so that you have some body of evidence that you could potentially provide. then making sure to report it to relevant authorities, consumer protection agencies, people who pursue fraudulent activity or pursue scammers, reporting it to the BBB Scam Tracker, things like that can be really beneficial. I also agree with the idea of trying to warn others. Not everybody is comfortable sharing that they have been scammed, but again, there's no shame there. It's not the victim's fault. So even if it's just sharing on some of your social media platforms, like, hey, FYI, I got scammed by this company or through this job posting, just to let people know. There are forums and communities out there for job seekers that you could potentially warn or utilize to warn others as well. And I think that's a really important step. I also recommend kind of strengthening your online security. So if you've been scammed, make sure that you're kind of reassessing that all your passwords are really strong. Maybe update all your software programs. Consider the two-factor authentication, and then just learn from your experience. I think that once you have gone through this experience and you do understand what you should be looking out for, just don't forget about it. Keep that information with you so that you can protect yourself in the future.
Thank you, Keith. That's such great advice and guidance from you today. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add to what Keith said that it's always a smart idea to go to bbb.org to research the company before applying. And for anyone who's already been targeted by an employment scam, please think about going to bbb.org/scam tracker to submit a report. We share that with the public and also the law enforcement and other fraud fighting partners. The more information we have, the more we understand what's going on, and we can help protect people. You can also go to Scam Tracker, as I mentioned earlier, and you can search to see if anyone has reported a URL, like a URL for a website or an email, or even the name of the business that's talking to you that you may be suspicious about. You can go in there and find out if somebody's already submitted a report. And then remember to walk away from job offerings that require any kind of upfront payment. That's one of the biggest red flags right there, that they're asking you for money for anything. That's a huge red flag. So, and there's many other things. I appreciate all our guests today for all of the great advice that they provided today. Thank you to Amisha for telling her story. We're so grateful that you spent the time telling us your story today. And thank you to Abby and Keith for the thoughtful guidance that you provided to help people stay safe while they're doing their job search. This is a very important topic and a scam that's really growing, so your guidance has been greatly appreciated. We have compiled a list of resources that I mentioned earlier for people who want to learn more about this topic. You can see that we've got resources from Amazon, from FlexJobs, and other places, including the Better Business Bureau. I'd like to thank everyone for watching today. It's been a pleasure sharing our BBB Scam Tracker Risk Report highlights and these important employment scam tips with all of you. We hope you'll stay safe and join us again soon. Thank you so much for joining us.